Everyone left the wounded alien creature to die slowly in the rubble, except the stubborn humans. The war-ravaged planet of Bajor Prime was a hellscape of collapsed buildings and scorched soil. Jeffrey Powell, a human soldier, stumbled through the ruins of yet another destroyed city. His orders were to rendezvous with his unit, but something caught his eye amidst the debris. It was an alien creature, badly wounded and malnourished, resembling a cross between a large feline and a dragon. Blue blood seeped from numerous gashes on its scaly hide. Powell knelt down beside the creature. Its breaths came in ragged gasps and its eyes were cloudy. He pulled out his medkit and began treating the wounds, applying coagulant gel and wrapping bandages. Powell shared his own meager rations, holding water to the creature's mouth. As he worked, Bajoran survivors passed by, both civilians and soldiers. They glanced at the creature, then kept walking, too focused on their own dire circumstances to help. Powell glared after them, disgusted by their callousness. Suddenly a group of Bajoran resistance fighters approached, weapons drawn. Their commander, Torkel, had a face like weathered stone. "Leave that thing and move on, human," Torkel spat. "We have no resources to waste on animals." "Then you're on your own. Don't expect help from us." Torkel turned to leave. Just then the creature let out a resonant cry, weak but haunting. Torkel paused, unnerved by its apparent sentience, then stalked off without another word. Powell knew he faced an uphill battle to keep this creature alive in such a harsh environment, with no support from the locals and limited supplies. But he had to try. Leaving it to die slowly and painfully was not an option. Days passed as Powell tended to Ceres, cleaning the creature's wounds and sharing his rations. Ceres' strength slowly returned. As they spent time together, Powell sensed waves of emotion emanating from Ceres: gratitude, curiosity, and a growing bond. He realized Ceres was communicating with him telepathically, sharing feelings and simple thoughts. Powell focused his mind, trying to send back feelings of reassurance and friendship. Through this connection, Powell gleaned insights into Ceres' kind, the Draconis. Images of majestic creatures soaring over untouched wilderness filled his mind. He understood they were not mere beasts, but guardians of Bajor's ecosystem, balancing predator and prey, maintaining harmony. Powell marveled at the profound link between the Draconis and their homeworld. One evening, as Powell was changing Ceres' dressings, a plasma bolt suddenly struck the wall above them. A Krill reconnaissance team had discovered their refuge. Powell grabbed his rifle and took cover behind rubble, shouting for Ceres to stay down. The Krill advanced, firing rapidly. Powell took aim, downing one with a headshot. Another fell to his expert marksmanship. But more Krill emerged from the shadows. One flanked Powell, ready to end him with a point-blank shot. Ceres leapt forward, a surge of energy bursting from its maw, incinerating the Krill where he stood. The remaining soldiers hesitated, shocked by Ceres' display of power. Powell seized the moment, dispatching the distracted Krill with lethal precision. As quickly as it began, the firefight was over. Powell turned to Ceres, amazed and grateful for the timely intervention. News of the skirmish spread like wildfire among the Bajorans. Torkel himself appeared at Powell's hideout, eyes wide as he beheld Ceres. He listened, astonished, as Powell recounted Ceres' abilities and their profound bond. Wheels turned in the Bajoran commander's mind. Perhaps this creature could be the key to turning the tide against the Krill. Torkel extended a hand to Powell. "An alliance," he proposed, "between my people and yours. Together with the power of the Draconis at our side, we may stand a chance." Torkel met Powell's gaze, understanding the depth of his commitment. "Agreed," he said solemnly. "The Draconis will be treated with the reverence they deserve." And so a partnership was forged in the crucible of war. Human, Bajoran, and Draconis united against the Krill Empire. The road ahead. The unlikely alliance between humans and Bajorans kicked into high gear. Commander Elara Reeves touched down on the war-torn surface of Bajor Prime, her shuttle kicking up clouds of ash. She strode out to meet Powell and Torkel, Ceres padding along at the human soldier's side. Reeves had to do a double-take at the alien creature, equal parts amazed and wary. "So this is the Draconis I've heard so much about," Reeves said, eyeing Ceres. The creature met her gaze evenly. "I'll admit I had my doubts about this partnership, but if it can give us an edge against those krill bastards, I'm all for it." Torkel nodded grimly. "The krill have oppressed my people for far too long. With your help, we finally have a chance to hit them where it hurts." Powell patted Ceres's flank. "And with Ceres on our side, we'll have the element of surprise. The krill won't know what hit them." Plans were quickly drawn up for a daring strike against a critical krill supply depot. Reeves gathered her most elite soldiers, hardened veterans of countless battles. They would work in tandem with Torkel's resistance fighters, a mix of grizzled warriors and young recruits eager to prove themselves. As the joint force approached the heavily guarded depot under cover of night, Ceres reached out with its telepathic senses. Powell felt the creature's mind brush against his own, images of krill soldiers flickering through his thoughts. Ceres was mapping out the enemy's positions, giving them a clear picture of what they were up against. "Ceres says there's a squad of krill sentries patrolling the perimeter," Powell whispered to Reeves and Torkel. "But there's a gap in their route on the eastern side. We can slip through there undetected." Powell just grinned. Ceres is full of surprises. With the intel provided by Ceres, the strike team moved like ghosts through the shadows. They breached the depot's walls without raising a single alarm. Inside, they split into two groups. Powell and Ceres broke off to plant explosive charges at key structural points, while Reeves and Torkel led the assault on the depot's defenders. All hell broke loose as plasma fire lit up the night. The krill soldiers, caught off guard, fell back in disarray. Reeves and her men pushed forward with ruthless efficiency, cutting down the enemy with precise bursts of rifle fire. Torkel's Bajorans fought with the ferocity of a people long oppressed, hungry for vengeance. Powell armed the last charge and gave Ceres a nod. "Time to blow this place to kingdom come." But as they moved to rejoin the others, a deafening metallic screech filled the air. A towering krill war machine, a bipedal monstrosity bristling with weapons, bore down on the strike team. It leveled its massive pulse cannons, unleashing a barrage of searing energy. Reeves cursed, diving for cover behind a burned-out hover transport. She popped up to return fire, but her shots pinged harmlessly off the mech's armor. Powell joined her, launching grenades that detonated uselessly against the machine's thick plating. Ceres, crouched at Powell's side, suddenly tensed. Powell felt a surge of determination flood through their bond. Before he could react, Ceres leapt from cover, bounding towards the war machine with astonishing speed. "Ceres, no!" Powell screamed, but the Draconis was already in motion. The mech swiveled its guns to track Ceres, but the nimble creature evaded the onslaught of plasma bolts. With a mighty leap, Ceres landed on the machine's hull, claws scrabbling for purchase. The Draconis reared back and unleashed a focused blast of energy from its maw, the searing beam cutting into the mech's armor like a blowtorch. Molten metal dripped from the glowing gash, exposing sparking circuitry beneath. Powell saw his chance. He primed his last grenade and hurled it with all his strength. The explosive arced through the air and disappeared into the breach Ceres had carved. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the war machine detonated from within, a brilliant fireball consuming it from the inside out. Flaming shrapnel rained down as the mech toppled, its twisted wreckage crashing to the ground. Ceres landed beside Powell, singed but unharmed. Powell threw his arms around the creature's neck, relief and gratitude flooding through him. Reeves approached, her eyes wide with awe. "That was incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Torkel clapped Powell on the shoulder. "You two make quite the team. With Ceres on our side, the krill don't stand a chance." As the strike team regrouped, the depot collapsing into rubble behind them, word of their victory spread like wildfire. Across Bajor, resistance cells celebrated, their hope rekindled. More factions flocked to join the alliance, bolstering their numbers and resolve. Reeves pulled Powell aside as they prepared to return to base. "That Draconis, Ceres, it's invaluable. If there are more like it out there, we need to find them. They could turn the tide of this whole damn war." Powell nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. If they could locate and recruit more of Ceres' kind, the Krill would face a force unlike any they had encountered before, a force that could finally bring an end to their tyranny and restore freedom to Bajor. The Krill Empire's retaliation was swift and brutal. Supreme Commander Zorgax, his face a mask of cold fury, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Annihilator. He watched as his armada tore through the Alliance's defenses, the massive warships unleashing a relentless barrage of plasma fire. On the ground, the Resistance fighters scrambled to evacuate their bases, loading wounded comrades and vital supplies onto transports. Plasma bolts rained down from the sky, turning buildings to rubble and sending plumes of smoke billowing into the air. In the chaos of the retreat, Powell and Ceres fought side by side, the Draconis' energy blasts and the humans' precise shots taking down Krill soldiers left and right. But the enemy's numbers seemed endless, and the pair found themselves being pushed back, separated from the main group. A searing plasma bolt struck the ground near Ceres, sending the creature tumbling. Powell rushed to its side, but a fresh wave of Krill troops forced him to take cover. He could only watch in despair as the enemy soldiers closed in on his fallen friend. Back at the hidden mountain base, Reeves pored over holomaps, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Torkel burst into the command center, his expression grim. Powell and the Draconis, they didn't make it back, he reported, his voice heavy with regret. Reeves slammed her fist on the table, the maps flickering. We have to get them back. Ceres is too valuable to lose. Powell stepped forward, his eyes blazing with determination. I'll go. I'll find Ceres and bring it back. Reeves hesitated, torn between the need to rescue their ally and the risk of losing more fighters. But the fierce resolve in Powell's gaze convinced her. She nodded curtly. Take a small team, move fast and stay low. The Krill will be looking for you. Powell gathered a hand-picked group of human and Bajoran soldiers, each one battle-hardened and loyal to the core. They set out under the cover of darkness, slipping through the war-torn landscape like ghosts. The journey was fraught with danger. Krill patrols seemed to lurk around every corner, their energy weapons always at the ready. Powell and his team relied on stealth and quick thinking to evade detection, darting from cover to cover and holding their breath as enemy soldiers passed mere meters away. As they neared the front lines, the signs of battle grew more intense. Scorched earth and twisted metal littered the ground, and the air hung heavy with the acrid smell of smoke and ozone. Suddenly, a Krill patrol emerged from the ruins directly ahead. Powell signaled for his team to take cover, but it was too late. The lead soldier spotted them and let out a shout, leveling his weapon. Powell reacted on instinct. He charged forward, firing his rifle in short, controlled bursts. His team followed suit, their own weapons adding to the cacophony. The Krill soldiers fell one by one, but not before one of their shots found its mark. A Bajoran fighter crumpled to the ground, clutching his side. The team quickly dispatched the remaining Krill and gathered around their fallen comrade. Powell knelt beside him, assessing the wound. It was bad, but not fatal. They hastily applied a field dressing and helped the injured Bajoran to his feet. We have to keep moving, Powell urged, his voice low and urgent. That firefight will have drawn attention. They pressed on, driven by desperation and the knowledge that every moment lost could mean the difference between life and death for Ceres. Finally, they reached the heavily guarded research facility where the Draconis was being held. Powell and his team split up, each taking position around the perimeter. On Powell's signal, they launched their assault, bursting through the facility's defenses in a hail of gunfire and energy blasts. Inside, they fought their way through the halls, taking down Krill guards with ruthless efficiency. Powell could feel Ceres' presence, a familiar tug at the edge of his mind. He followed the sensation, his heart pounding in his chest. At last he burst into the central chamber. Ceres lay restrained on an examination table, surrounded by Krill scientists. Powell didn't hesitate. He opened fire, the scientists falling before they could even reach for their weapons. He rushed to Ceres' side, quickly undoing the restraints. The Draconis let out a weak chirp, its eyes flickering open. Powell felt a surge of relief flood through him. Agony erupted through Powell's body as he crumpled to the floor. Ceres, enraged by the sight of its friend's pain, let loose a devastating blast of energy. The guard was vaporized where he stood, along with every piece of equipment in the room. Ceres nudged Powell with its snout, a low keening sound emanating from its throat. Powell struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the creature for support. Together, they staggered out of the facility, rejoining the rest of the team. The journey back to the resistance base was a blur of pain and desperation. Powell drifted in and out of consciousness, his life hanging by a thread. Ceres never left his side, its presence a constant comfort in the haze of agony. As they neared the base, Powell's strength finally gave out. He collapsed to the ground, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The team gathered around him, their faces etched with worry. But Ceres wasn't ready to give up. The Draconis closed its eyes, reaching out with its mind. Images flashed through Powell's fading consciousness, a hidden temple, ancient technology, a glimmer of hope. With the last of its strength, Ceres guided the team to the temple, nestled deep within the mountains. Inside, they found a treasure trove of advanced medical equipment, far beyond anything they had seen before. They quickly set to work, using the technology to stabilize Powell's condition. The wounds began to heal, the bleeding slowing to a trickle, but even as his body mended, Powell remained unconscious, lost in a deep, dreamless sleep. The team gathered around their fallen leader, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Ceres lay curled at Powell's side, its head resting on his chest. They had brought him back from the brink of death, but his fate still hung in the balance. All they could do now was wait and pray that Powell would find his way back to them. The war still raged beyond the temple walls, and they needed him now more than ever. Ceres let out a low, mournful sound, echoing the despair they all felt in their hearts. With Powell lying comatose in the hidden temple, the weight of leadership fell on the shoulders of Commander Elara Reeves and Torkel. They huddled around a flickering holotable, the blue glow casting shadows across their weary faces. Ceres sat beside them, its eyes fixed on the shimmering display. Reeves zoomed in on a pulsing marker, her brow furrowed. The cradle of life. If what Ceres showed us is true, that's where we'll find the answers we need. Torkel nodded grimly. A perilous journey, but one we must take. The fate of Bajor hangs in the balance. They gathered a small team of their most skilled fighters, both human and Bajoran. Ceres took point as they set out, the alien creature's senses guiding them through the war-torn landscape. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the terrain grew more treacherous. Jagged cliffs and yawning chasms barred their path, forcing them to take risky detours. Hostile creatures, twisted by the Krill's dark energies, stalked them from the shadows. But the greatest danger came from the Krill themselves. Scouting parties crisscrossed the region, their weapons always at the ready. Reeves and Torkel's team engaged them in brief but brutal firefights, each clash leaving them more battered and depleted. Along the way they uncovered ancient ruins, the crumbling stone marked with intricate spirals, the same pattern that adorned Ceres's scales. Torkel ran his fingers over the weathered carvings, his eyes widening with realization. The Draconis. They're not just guardians, they're part of Bajor itself, woven into the very fabric of our world. As they neared the cradle of life, a sense of unease settled over the group. The air thrummed with an alien energy, setting their teeth on edge. Ceres grew more agitated, its head swiveling as if sensing an unseen threat. That threat materialized in the form of Commander Zex and his elite Krill assassins. They emerged from the shadows, their black armor drinking in the light. Zex's eyes glinted with malice as he leveled his pulse rifle at Reeves. "You've caused enough trouble for the Krill Empire," he snarled. "This ends now." Reeves and Torkel reacted instantly, diving for cover as plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Their team scattered, finding what scant protection they could among the rocks. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Reeves and Torkel fought side by side, their movements synchronized through countless hours of training. They cut down krill assassins with precise bursts of fire, watching each other's backs as they had countless times before. But Zex's forces were relentless. For every krill that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. The human Bajoran team was pushed back, their lines slowly crumbling. Zex let out a roar of fury, turning his weapon on Ceres. But Reeves was faster. Her shot caught the krill commander in the chest, burning a hole clean through his armor. He crumpled, his lifeless body tumbling to the ground. With their leader fallen, the remaining krill quickly lost heart. They broke and ran, disappearing back into the shadows from whence they came. Reeves and Torkel regrouped, their chests heaving with exertion. They took stock of their casualties. Several of their team had fallen, but they had emerged victorious. With renewed determination, they pressed on towards the cradle of life. They entered a vast chamber, its walls pulsing with shimmering energy. In the center stood a towering crystal, its facets alive with swirling light. Ceres approached the crystal, placing a clawed hand upon its surface. Images flooded into Reeves and Torkel's minds, visions of the Draconis' true nature, their symbiotic bond with Bajor Prime. They saw how the krill's invasion had shattered this delicate balance, threatening to unravel the very fabric of the world. The krill must be driven from Bajor, Ceres' voice echoed in their thoughts. Only then can the Draconis heal what has been broken. Reeves and Torkel exchanged a glance, the weight of this revelation settling upon their shoulders. They knew what must be done. As they made their way back to the resistance base, they began to formulate a plan for a final strike against the krill. They would rally every ally, every resource they had, for one last desperate gamble. But even as they plotted and schemed, their thoughts turned to Powell, still locked in his coma back at the hidden temple. They could only hope that wherever his mind wandered, he would find the strength to return to them, for they would need him now more than ever. In that surreal dreamscape, Powell found himself face to face with a figure cloaked in shimmering light. The being's features were indistinct, but its voice rang out with clarity. "You hold the key, Jeffrey Powell," it intoned. "The path to victory lies within you, but you must be willing to sacrifice everything to grasp it." Zephyr's form shimmered, ancient power radiating from his being. "Long ago," he began, his voice resonating through the ethereal space, "the Draconis willingly dampened their abilities to maintain balance on Bajor Prime. But now, in this time of great need, you must help us reclaim our full strength." Powell's mind raced, the weight of this revelation settling upon him. What must I do? "Seek out the sacred relics," Zephyr instructed, "the Heart of Fire, the Soulstone of the Ancients, and the Cosmic Helm. Each one holds a piece of our lost power. Only by uniting them can we hope to stand against the krill." With a nod of determination, Powell set out on his spiritual quest, the fate of Bajor Prime hanging in the balance. Back in the waking world, Reeves and Torkel huddled over a holographic display of the Annihilator. The krill flagship loomed menacingly, its energy shield a pulsing barrier of impenetrable force. "We need to find a way to breach that shield," Reeves muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. Torkel zoomed in on a schematic, pointing to a small node on the ship's hull. "There, the shield generator. If we can take that out, the Annihilator will be vulnerable." Reeves nodded grimly. "It won't be easy. We'll need a diversion, something to draw their attention while a strike team infiltrates the ship." As they planned their daring assault, Ceres sat cross-legged in a quiet corner of the base, its eyes closed in deep meditation. The Draconis reached out with its mind, seeking Powell across the vast expanse of the dreamscape. Powell felt Ceres' presence like a guiding light, leading him through the misty realm of his unconscious mind. He found himself standing before a towering volcano, its peak wreathed in smoke and flame. The Heart of Fire. With a deep breath, Powell began his ascent. The path was treacherous, loose rock crumbling beneath his feet. Searing heat blasted his face as he climbed higher, sweat pouring down his back. Suddenly, a massive figure emerged from the smoke. an ancient guardian, its body hewn from living magma. It bellowed a challenge, molten fists clenched in rage. Powell stood his ground, drawing upon the strength of his bond with Ceres. He focused his mind, reaching out to the Guardian's consciousness. "I come seeking the heart of fire," he projected with all his will, not as an enemy, but as a champion of Bajor Prime. The Guardian hesitated, the fire in its eyes flickering with confusion. Powell pressed on, sharing visions of the Krill's destruction, the suffering of the Bajorans, and the desperate need for the Draconis' power. Slowly, the Guardian's stance relaxed. It reached out a hand, magma dripping from its fingers, and placed it on Powell's chest. A searing heat engulfed him, and for a moment he thought he would be consumed by the flames. But as the pain reached its crescendo, Powell felt something shift within him. The heat receded, replaced by a pulsing warmth that suffused his entire being. The heart of fire had accepted him. One relic down, 2 to go. Powell's spiritual journey had only just begun, but already he could feel the power of the Draconis stirring within him. Back on the physical plane, Reeves and Torkel's forces moved into position around the Annihilator. Cloaked ships darted through the void, slipping past Krill sensors undetected. Strike teams readied their weapons, preparing to board the enemy flagship on Reeves's command. In a blinding flash of light, a dozen Bajoran fighters decloaked directly in front of the Annihilator, drawing the Krill's fire. The distraction was working. With a thunderous detonation, the generator exploded, and the Annihilator's shield flickered and died. Reeves and her team breached the hull, storming into the ship with weapons blazing. Krill soldiers swarmed to meet them, plasma fire filling the corridors. Reeves and Torkel fought side by side, their movements fluid and precise, honed by countless battles. They pushed forward relentlessly, carving a path of destruction through the enemy ranks. But as they neared the bridge, they found themselves facing a force beyond anything they had anticipated. Zorgax's elite guard, each warrior a match for a dozen ordinary soldiers, and at their center, the Supreme Commander himself, his eyes glinting with malevolent glee. Reeves and Torkel exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the odds they faced. They charged forward, blasters firing, ready to sell their lives dearly for a chance to end Zorgax's reign of terror. Zephyr's words echoed through Powell's mind as he stood on the bridge of the Annihilator, the sacred relics thrumming with power at his side. Ceres crouched beside him, scales pulsing with an otherworldly light. Together they faced down the Krill forces, the air crackling with tension. Powell raised the heart of fire, its crimson glow casting eerie shadows across the bridge. The Krill soldiers faltered, their weapons lowering in the face of this unknown power. "Stand down," Powell commanded, his voice resonating with authority. "Your Supreme Commander is defeated. Your flagship is ours. Surrender now, and you will be shown mercy." Ceres growled, a low rumbling sound that sent shivers down the spines of the Krill. The alien creature's eyes blazed with an inner fire, a testament to the unbreakable bond it shared with Powell. Reeves and Torkel stepped forward, their weapons trained on the Krill. The human and Bajoran forces fanned out behind them, ready to strike at a moment's notice. "You heard the man," Reeves barked, her finger hovering over the trigger of her plasma rifle. "Drop your weapons and surrender. Now." For a tense moment, the Krill hesitated, their eyes darting between Powell, Ceres, and their fallen leader. Then, one by one, they began to lay down their arms, the clatter of weapons on the metal floor, a sound of defeat. As the last Krill soldier surrendered, Powell allowed himself a moment of relief. But it was short-lived. A sudden movement caught his eye, and he spun to see Zorgax, battered but not broken, rising from the ground. The Krill commander's eyes blazed with hatred as he lifted a hidden plasma pistol, aiming it directly at Powell's heart. "If I cannot have victory," Zorgax snarled, "then I will have vengeance." Time seemed to slow as Zorgax's finger tightened on the trigger. Powell braced himself for the searing impact of the plasma bolt, but it never came. In a blur of motion, Ceres leapt in front of Powell, its body shielding him from the deadly blast. The plasma bolt struck the alien creature square in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground in a heap of smoking scales. "No!" Powell screamed, his voice raw with anguish. He rushed to Ceres' side, cradling the creature's head in his lap. Bright blue blood seeped from the wound, staining Powell's hands as he desperately tried to stem the flow. Ceres let out a weak chirp, its eyes flickering with pain. Powell felt a wave of emotions wash over him, gratitude, sorrow, and a love so deep it took his breath away. "Stay with me, Ceres," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Don't you dare leave me now." But even as he spoke the words, he knew it was too late. He could feel Ceres slipping away, the light in its eyes dimming with each passing second. With a final shuddering breath, Ceres went still, its body lifeless in Powell's arms. A rage unlike anything Powell had ever known consumed him. He gently laid Ceres' body on the ground, then rose to his feet, the relics glowing with an angry, pulsating light. He turned to face Zorgax, who stood frozen, the plasma pistol still smoking in his hand. The Krill commander's face was a mask of shock and fear, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had done. Powell advanced on Zorgax, the relics pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The air around him shimmered with barely contained power, his eyes blazing with a fury that could reduce worlds to ashes. "You," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, "you took everything from me." Zorgax stumbled back, his bravado crumbling in the face of Powell's wrath. He raised the plasma pistol, but it was too late. Powell lashed out with the power of the relics, a blinding beam of energy engulfing Zorgax. The Krill commander screamed, his body disintegrating in the face of the onslaught. In a matter of seconds, he was reduced to nothing more than a pile of smoking ash. As the glow of the relics faded, Powell turned to face the bridge, his chest heaving with exertion and grief. Reeves and Torkel stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. Powell's gaze fell on Ceres' lifeless form, and a fresh wave of anguish washed over him. He fell to his knees beside the fallen creature, gathering its body in his arms. And then, in the midst of his despair, a shimmering figure appeared before him. It was Zephyr, the Draconis Elder, his form ethereal and glowing with an inner light. "Do not despair, Geoffrey Powell," Zephyr said, his voice a soothing balm to Powell's fractured soul. "For even in death there is hope." Powell looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with pain. "What hope is there?" he asked, his voice raw and broken. "Ceres is gone. I failed to protect the one being that mattered most to me." Zephyr shook his head, a gentle smile on his ancient face. "No, Geoffrey Powell, you did not fail. Ceres made a choice born of love and sacrifice, and that choice has the power to change the fate of worlds." The elder reached out, placing a translucent hand on Ceres' still form. A soft glow emanated from his touch, suffusing the fallen creature with an ethereal light. "The bond you share with Ceres is stronger than death itself," Zephyr said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "And through that bond, there is a chance to bring Ceres back from the brink of oblivion." Powell's heart leapt in his chest, a flicker of hope igniting in the depths of his soul. He looked at Zephyr, his eyes wide with a desperate, fragile hope. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "tell me what I must do." Zephyr's smile widened, his eyes glinting with a knowing light. "The path will not be easy," he warned, "and the price may be high. But if your love for Ceres is true, if your bond is unbreakable, then there is a way." The elder leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Seek out the heart of Bajor Prime," he said, his words heavy with meaning. "There, in the very core of the planet, lies the key to Ceres' salvation. But be warned, the journey will test you in ways you cannot imagine. You must be willing to sacrifice everything, your life, your very soul, for the chance to bring Ceres back." Powell nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I will do whatever it takes," he vowed, his voice ringing with conviction. "I will not let Ceres' sacrifice be in vain." Zephyr nodded, a look of approval on his face. Then go, Geoffrey Powell, go, and may the spirits of Bajor Prime guide your path. With those final words, the Elder faded from view, leaving Powell alone on the bridge of the Annihilator, Ceres's body cradled in his arms. Powell rose to his feet, gently laying Ceres's body down on the cold metal floor. He turned to face Reeves and Torkel, his eyes blazing with a newfound purpose. "Take control of the ship," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Broadcast the message to the Krill forces. Demand their surrender. I have a mission of my own to complete." Reeves stepped forward, her brow furrowed with concern. "What mission?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Where are you going?" With those words he strode from the bridge, the relics glowing at his side, his heart filled with a fierce, unyielding determination. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, that the price of failure would be higher than he could imagine. But he also knew that he would pay that price gladly if it meant the chance to bring Ceres back from the brink of death. For in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the war, not the fate of Bajor Prime, not even his own life. All that mattered was the bond he shared with Ceres, a bond that transcended life and death, a bond that would guide him through the darkness to come. And so Geoffrey Powell set out on his final mission, his heart filled with love and his soul steeled with resolve, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in the name of the one being that meant everything to him. Zephyr's words filled Powell with a sense of purpose, cutting through the haze of grief that threatened to consume him. He looked down at Ceres's lifeless form, cradled in his arms, and felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. If there was even the slightest chance to bring his friend back, he would move heaven and earth to make it happen. Powell rose to his feet, Ceres' body held close to his heart. He turned to face Reeves and Torkel, his eyes blazing with determination. "We need to get to the cradle of life," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of emotion bearing down on him. "It's the only way to save Ceres and restore balance to Bajor Prime." Reeves and Torkel exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of hope and trepidation. They had seen the power of the cradle firsthand, but the journey there would be fraught with danger. Still, they knew that this was their best chance to save not only Ceres, but their entire world. Torkel nodded in agreement. "I'll gather our best warriors to accompany us. We'll need all the protection we can get." As the honor guard assembled, a sense of solemnity descended upon the group. They knew that the fate of Bajor Prime rested on their shoulders, and failure was not an option. With Ceres' body secured on a makeshift stretcher, they set out on their journey to the cradle of life. The path was treacherous, winding through the war-torn landscape of Bajor Prime. The scars of battle were everywhere, from the scorched earth to the shattered remnants of once thriving cities. But as they pressed on, Powell and the others began to notice something extraordinary happening around them. In the midst of the destruction, new life was beginning to emerge. Tiny shoots of green pushed their way through the ashen soil, reaching towards the sun with a tenacity that defied the odds. Flowers bloomed in the cracks of broken concrete, their delicate petals a splash of color against the gray. It was as if the planet itself was beginning to heal, drawing strength from the sacrifice of the fallen Draconis. As they neared the cradle of life, the sense of renewal grew stronger. The air hummed with an ancient energy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with a life force of its own. Powell felt a surge of hope rising within him, buoyed by the knowledge that they were on the right path. At last they reached the entrance to the cradle, a massive stone archway carved with intricate symbols. Powell took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With Reeves and Torkel at his side, he stepped through the threshold, Ceres' body held tight in his arms. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls pulsing with a soft, ethereal light. In the center of the room stood a raised platform, surrounded by a circle of ancient stones. Powell knew instinctively that this was where Ceres needed to be. Gently, reverently, he laid Ceres' body on the platform, arranging the sacred relics around it in a pattern that felt right, though he couldn't explain why. As he stepped back, the chamber began to hum with energy, the light growing brighter and more intense with each passing second. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the center of the room, forcing Powell and the others to shield their eyes. The light was searing, all-consuming, and for a moment, Powell feared that they had made a terrible mistake. But as the light began to fade, he heard a sound that made his heart leap in his chest. It was a chirp, weak at first but growing stronger with each repetition. Powell blinked away the spots in his vision, hardly daring to hope. There, rising from the center of the platform, was Ceres. The Draconis was alive, its scales shimmering with an otherworldly radiance. Its eyes met Powell's, and in that moment he knew that their bond was stronger than ever. Ceres stepped down from the platform, its movements fluid and graceful. It approached Powell, pressing its forehead against his in a gesture of profound gratitude. Powell felt tears streaming down his face, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Powell nodded, his heart too full for words. He watched in awe as Ceres turned its attention to the cradle, drawing upon the ancient power that flowed through the chamber. The Draconis' scales pulsed with energy, and a wave of light began to emanate from its body, spreading outwards like ripples in a pond. Across Bajor Prime, other Draconis began to emerge from their hiding places, drawn by the call of their restored leader. They rose from the ashes of the war, their powers rekindled and their purpose renewed. Together they set to work, weaving their magic to heal the wounds of the planet and bring new life to the barren lands. As the days turned into weeks, Bajor Prime began to transform before Powell's eyes. The once desolate wastelands bloomed with lush vegetation, and the ruins of the cities were slowly reclaimed by nature. The air grew sweet and clear, and the sounds of bird song and rushing water filled the spaces that had once echoed with the clamor of war. The human-Bajoran alliance, too, began to rebuild. With the threat of the Krill finally vanquished, they turned their attention to the future, working tirelessly to establish a new government founded on the principles of cooperation, equality, and respect for all life. Powell and Reeves, hailed as the heroes who had led the charge against the Krill, took on leadership roles in the new administration. They worked hand-in-hand with Tor-Kel and the other Bajoran leaders, striving to create a society that would stand the test of time. And through it all, Ceres remained at Powell's side, a constant reminder of the power of friendship, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that had brought them all to this moment. Together they looked to the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that they had each other, and the strength of an entire world behind them. The path forward would not be easy, but Powell knew that with Ceres by his side and the support of his allies, anything was possible. They had already achieved the impossible, after all. They had brought a fallen friend back from the brink of death and set an entire planet on the road to recovery. As Powell stood on the balcony of the newly constructed government building, looking out over the verdant landscape of Bajor Prime, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The war had taken so much from them all, but it had also given them the chance to build something new, something better. He glanced over at Ceres, who was perched on the railing beside him, its scales glinting in the sunlight. The Draconis turned its head, meeting Powell's gaze with eyes that sparkled with intelligence and understanding. "We did it," Powell said softly, reaching out to run a hand along Ceres's flank. "We saved Bajor Prime and we saved each other." Ceres chirped in agreement, leaning into Powell's touch. "And now we have a chance to create a future that is brighter than anything we could have imagined." Powell nodded, his heart swelling with hope and determination. He knew that the road ahead would be long and full of challenges, but he also knew that they would face those challenges together, united by the bonds of friendship and the unwavering belief in a better tomorrow. With a final glance out over the lush landscape of Bajor Prime, Powell turned back to the government building, ready to begin the work of building a new world. Months passed since the fall of the Krill Empire, and life on Bajor Prime settled into a new rhythm. The war-torn planet slowly healed, its ecosystems regenerating under the watchful guardianship of the Draconis. The human Bajoran government, now led by seasoned leaders Powell, Reeves, and Tor-Kel, worked tirelessly to rebuild and unite the once fractured population. But even as Bajor Prime flourished, a new threat lurked in the shadows of the galaxy. On the fringes of Bajoran space, a mysterious alien race known as the Vortex began to make their presence known. Led by their enigmatic queen, Zilara, the Vortex had one goal: to harness the power of the Draconis for their own sinister purposes. Zilara's agents infiltrated Bajoran society, employing advanced cloaking technology and mind control devices to sow discord and confusion among the populace. Whispers of unrest and strange disappearances began to reach the ears of Powell and his allies. In the halls of the government, Powell, Reeves, and Torkel pored over intelligence reports, their faces etched with concern. Ceres, the mighty Draconis bonded to Powell, sensed the growing danger, its scales shimmering with unease. "The Vortex are making their move," Powell said grimly, his eyes scanning the holographic display. "We have to stop them before it's too late." Reeves nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We'll mobilize our forces, work with the Draconis to counter this threat." So began a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Powell and his team racing to uncover the Vortex's true intentions and protect the Draconis from their clutches. Covert missions and espionage operations became the order of the day, as human and Bajoran agents worked tirelessly to expose the Vortex's hidden operatives. But Zilara was always one step ahead. Her agents managed to capture a number of Draconis, enslaving them with mind control technology. Powell and his team grew increasingly desperate as they watched their alien allies disappear one by one. It was during a daring raid on a secret Vortex base that they finally uncovered the true extent of Zilara's plans. The Vortex Queen intended to use the enslaved Draconis to open a massive wormhole, one that would allow her to bring her entire armada into Bajoran space and conquer the planet. Powell, Torkel, and Ceres led a final desperate assault on the Vortex stronghold. They fought their way through hordes of mind-controlled soldiers and deadly alien warriors, the stronghold's halls ringing with the sound of plasma fire and the clash of blades. At last they reached the ritual chamber, just as Zilara was about to complete the final incantation. The Vortex Queen stood at the center of a swirling vortex of energy, her eyes glowing with malevolent power. Around her, enslaved Draconis writhed in agony, their life force being drained to fuel the wormhole. Powell and his allies launched themselves into battle, using every skill and weapon at their disposal, to stop Zilara and free the remaining Draconis. But the Vortex Queen was a formidable foe, her mastery of dark energies making her all but invincible. Just as all hope seemed lost, a blast of plasma fire erupted from the chamber entrance. Reeves, battered but unbroken, charged into the fray, leading a contingent of Bajoran resistance fighters. She had managed to break free from her captors and rally reinforcements, arriving just in time to turn the tide of the battle. With renewed strength, Powell and his allies pressed their attack, converging on Zilara in a final climactic showdown. The fate of Bajor Prime and the entire galaxy hung in the balance as they clashed in a whirlwind of fire and fury. As the battle raged on in the ritual chamber, Powell and Zilara circled each other, their eyes locked in a fierce stare. They clashed in a whirlwind of fists and feet, each blow fueled by their unwavering resolve. Powell ducked under a vicious right hook and countered with a swift kick to Zilara's midsection, sending her staggering back. On the other side of the chamber, Ceres and the freed Draconis focused their energy on the swirling vortex of dark magic. Their scales pulsed with an ethereal light as they poured their power into unraveling the sinister ritual. The air crackled with electricity, and the ground shook beneath their feet. Reeves and Torkel fought back to back, their weapons blazing as they cut through the ranks of the Vortex soldiers. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, and the stench of burnt flesh filled their nostrils. They pressed forward, driven by the strength of their bond, and the knowledge that failure was not an option. The chamber shuddered as the cosmic energies clashed, threatening to rip apart the very foundations of reality. Powell and Zilara grappled with each other, their bodies battered and bleeding. In that moment of chaos, Powell saw with perfect clarity what he had to do. He grabbed Zylara by the collar and dragged her towards the pulsating portal. She thrashed in his grip, her eyes wide with fear and rage. Powell felt a wave of sorrow wash over him as he looked back at his comrades, at Ceres, knowing that this was the end. Ceres let out a haunting cry, a sound that tore at Powell's heart. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a lifetime of love and understanding passed between them. Powell gave a final, sorrowful nod, then turned and hurled himself and Zylara into the heart of the wormhole. The portal collapsed in on itself, the cosmic energies dissipating in a blinding flash of light. The chamber fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the survivors. It was over. The vortex threat had been ended, but at a terrible cost. In the days that followed, the Bajorans and humans mourned the loss of their hero. Powell's sacrifice had saved them all, but the pain of his absence was a heavy weight on their hearts. Reeves and Torkel, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken, stepped up to lead their people into a new era of rebuilding and healing. Ceres, forever changed by the loss of its closest friend, took on the mantle of Guardian. It watched over Bajor Prime with a solemn sense of duty, its heart heavy with the memory of Powell's bravery and compassion. As the years passed, Powell's legend grew. His story was told and retold, passed down from generation to generation as a shining example of the power of sacrifice and the unbreakable bonds of friendship. The alliance he had forged between humans, Bajorans, and Draconis endured, a testament to his legacy. But even as life on Bajor Prime flourished, the scars of war remained. The pain of loss, the memories of those who had fallen, never truly faded. They served as a constant reminder of the fragility of peace and the eternal struggle against the forces of darkness. And so the people of Bajor Prime carried on, united by their shared history and the knowledge that in the face of even the greatest threats, hope and unity would always light the way forward. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.